Okay, welcome everyone. Happy Saturday. Hope your weekend is off to a great start. We are so excited to have you for session 3 of youth leadership training. And for those of you who are joining us, this is your first session. Welcome. If you've been with us for the first 2 sessions, welcome back. Happy to see you again. We're really excited for the panel today. We've got some great speakers. But before we go ahead and get started, as always, I'm going to have all of our attendees go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. Let me just double check that the settings are good. Yes. Go ahead in the chat. Let us know your name, your age, where you're from, and then today's icebreaker, kind of on theme with session 3 campaign organizing. If you could pick one issue in your community to address through a campaign, what would it be? What would you want to get people to take action on? So that is going to be kind of the theme for the conversation today. So go ahead and let us know your thoughts in the chat, and we'll get started in just a minute. We've already got some folks from Connecticut and the Philippines. Lovely to see you guys joining us. South Africa, wonderful. Papua New Guinea, Ecuador, India, Solomon Islands. So many folks from all over the place. It's amazing. I hope you guys are not up too late or in the middle of the night, first thing in the morning. The time zones I know can be a little tricky. Awesome. From the United States, Brazil, Nigeria. Excellent. Okay. Go ahead and keep introducing yourselves in the chat. Again, feel free to let us know your thoughts on this icebreaker. I am curious to see what you guys have to say. And that might be something that you think about throughout this conversation. As always, as we're going through the panel, feel free to leave any questions for our panelists in the chat or go ahead and use the Zoom Q&A feature. We'll be sure to have some time for that at the end. But to get started, just a reminder, if you are just joining us for the first time, sessions 1 and 2 are up on the World Ocean Day YouTube channel. This session will also be uploaded to the World Ocean Day YouTube channel probably Monday or Tuesday, and so will the last session next week as well. So if you miss any sessions, definitely check them out there. But yeah, the agenda for today, as always, just welcoming everybody in. I'm going to introduce our lovely panelists. We'll jump right into the discussion, have time for Q&A at the end, and then just a couple of announcements at the end. So quickly to introduce myself, once again, my name is Laura Johnson. I am the former youth programs manager for the Ocean Project and World Ocean Day. I helped develop this youth leadership training in 2022. You have probably seen me if you have done this program before, but if not, I'm very happy to have you here and very, very grateful for your time. But now to introduce our first wonderful speaker, we have Brigitte. She is the founder of 30 by 30 Indonesia and Diverseas, and she has done some really, really phenomenal community organizing work, both on a local and national level. So I'll pass it over to Brigitte if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Laura, for the short introduction. I'm from Indonesia and I'm calling in from Melbourne, Australia, and I'm keen to share more about the nonprofit work that I do as well as how we organize campaigns.
Awesome. Thank you, Brigitte. And our second panelist of the day is Maria. She is a PhD student and is working on some really phenomenal coalition building for law students against deep sea mining. So I will pass it off to Maria to introduce herself as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm so honored to be speaking to all of you today from all different countries around the world. I'm actually a law student in my last semester. And in the beginning of my law journey, I started a coalition against deep sea mining. I wanted to use the skills that I had to fight for the protection of the deep sea. which I thought was an area of the planet that not a lot of people know about, maybe not a lot of people care about or know what's happening there. So I'm very excited to talk about the work that we do, and how other people can sort of implement some of the things that we've learned along the way.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. And yes, law student, not PhDs. Thank you. Okay, so jumping right into the discussion, both of you have a lot of expertise in what it means to build collective power around a specific issue. Being able to initiate that large scale change requires a lot of teamwork, patience, determination, but where the heck do we start? Like, that is a really big ask for a young person just sort of dipping their toe into campaign organizing for the first time. So, let's start with the building blocks a little bit. This first question here: how do you run a campaign? Where do you start? How does building collective power through campaigns help move the needle in all of the work that we're trying to do and actually build that lasting change that we're looking for? I know this is a really big question, but again, foundationals right off the bat. So I will pass it off to whoever would like to go first.
Yeah, maybe I can start. I guess just the context of what I've been doing. I started off my journey in ocean conservation when I was 17. I was in high school, and there was an opportunity for me to advocate for what's known as the 30 by 30 global goal to protect at least 30% of the global ocean by 2030. And so it was around the time of the pandemic, but we managed to organize a digital campaign around advocating for 30 by 30 and what it means to have that adopted into what's known as the global biodiversity framework. The three things that I think is most important is knowing your audience, of course. Who are the people that you're going to target this campaign for, and who are the respondees that you're hoping for change to happen? Who are these policymakers? Are these your school leaders? Secondly, being the outcome, what sort of outcome you're hoping to get? Is it a social media campaign where you're looking for reach or engagement, or is it like a petition where you're asking people to sign things for a policy outcome? And lastly, I think the most important thing is knowing how much time you want to spend on it, and perhaps even for the campaign itself. Some campaigns can be short term, some can go longer and even last years. So I think knowing how much capacity you have as a young leader, especially juggling all the other things you're doing, is really important. And I've realized that it's those are the three things that are really important to me. And I wish I knew earlier before I actually started the campaign. But yeah, that's the main things that I would highlight.
Yeah, definitely. I think that knowing your own capacity is definitely a huge component of that. Maria, I'll pass it off to you.
I mean, I will say everything that Brigitte says was absolutely on point. I'll also say that we can start with an idea, and we start with knowledge. The reason I started all of this was because I saw a TED Talk, about what was happening regarding deep sea mining, and it led me to this just me obsessively researching it, and thinking, what can I do to do something about this? How can I put my skills and what I'm learning in law school? How can I apply it to deep sea mining? So I would say just start with an idea, start with knowledge. What Brigida says was absolutely right. You start with a goal. Be very clear on what your goal is. Is it like an overarching goal and you have steps that you're going to use to reach that goal? Or is this just like a small short-term campaign? So be very clear about your goal. I would say research to see if someone else is already working on this and always reach out. Passion is incredibly contagious. So if someone that is already working on this topic sees your passion, it is very likely that they're going to want to work with you. Or if you just have a passion for something and you want to start by leading that, I always see that people get attracted to passion. They like to work with someone that's passionate about what they're doing. I will say find a community. I think we're going to talk about it a little bit more later on, but it's incredibly important to find other people who care about the same thing that you do, people you can rely on. The campaign is going to be much more impactful if you're working on tandem with other people as well. I always say create a group chat. I love a good group chat for planning. That's always the one thing that I think is incredibly necessary. You can create different group chats for short-term campaigns, a wider group chat for everyone who might be interested in working with you, and then just get going. Don't think that as a perfectionist, I always want something to be perfect, and I realized that my strive for perfection was getting in the way of impactful action. So sometimes just jump headfirst. You'll learn along the way, and as you start walking, the path will appear.
Yeah, definitely. I think two of your points were really huge. One being the setting your goal and then kind of working backwards from there and figuring out what needs to get done to get to that point, and then also the idea of finding community and figuring out who can be placed where within your team and reaching out to people in the community who are already doing that work. There's so many people who are in this already, and they always have like these insights that a young person who's just starting out might not already have. And we need to foster that kind of collaboration. So this next question is a lovely question that was actually, I believe, Brigitte, you had suggested adding this one, or maybe it was Maria. I don't remember which one of you in the email the other day. But I wanted to definitely add this to this slide because I just love it because, if you watching this are participating in this program right now, you're watching this live, you already have a baseline understanding of the importance in this work and why you want to do it. There's something in you already that is leading you in this direction. But it can be really daunting and overwhelming, and campaign organizing, if you're not familiar with that work, can very quickly burn you out and it can very quickly overwhelm you. So I want to pose this question to both of you about young people and what they bring to the table, because it is always just so spectacular to see what happens when young people are given the tools that they need to like make change. But what is it about young people that makes them so impactful in this work? Whoever wants to go first.
So I can start. I was the one that submitted the
Okay.
question because I thought that I was seeing that a lot of the times young people are sort of not taken as seriously because of the skills they don't have, while young people do have a lot of skills. They do have a lot of skills. So we shouldn't be overlooking what youth leaders can and are bringing to the table just because of what they're still lacking or what they still have to learn. But the one thing that I will say and that I always think is incredibly important is just the fact that we all live in an attention economy. What people pay attention to is where money is being spent. It is where people want to invest their time and their effort on it. We absolutely live in a place where you can bring attention to an issue, that is an issue that is going to be taken more seriously. And no one can direct attention better to an issue than young people can. And I'm talking about social media. I'm talking about the fact that often when people grow up, they invest in their families. Maybe they're not going out to big gatherings anymore. Young people can really spread the word with something through social media, through social gatherings, through parties, through doing something fun. I always find that being scrappy and not following the sort of set rules of this is how we've done a campaign in the past, therefore this is how we're going to keep doing it. Bringing youth to the table can really, or at least for me, has really shown me different ways of doing things. I'll also say that a lot of the time, um, being just a lot of time I feel that we can get stuck in bureaucracy. When I'm doing a little bit of my advocacy work, at least when I started in the deep sea mining campaign, we were being told, well, this is just a done deal. You're not going to change anything. Now, 4 years down the line, we've seen that still deep sea mining hasn't gotten off the ground. This for us is an absolute, it's a miracle. And this was done just young people being scrappy, talking about it in social media, not being too bogged down by the fact that these bureaucratic processes are going on. No, we're going to find different ways of trying to make this happen. And I think that this is absolutely something that is incredibly important and why youth need to be part of any team that wants to bring an action to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Brigitte, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think the only thing that I would add is just to realize that you can leverage your own lived experiences. I think no other generation have grown up with the amount of social media, actually global exposure, and being a tech savvy generation has its own superpowers. And if we use it for good, it can make a really good impact that maybe has not been achieved previously.
Yeah, totally. I think that throughout history, young people have been at the forefront of social movements around the world. And To your point, Brigitte, social media is like the game changer here, and it really is something special. And I think also, Maria, to your point, being scrappy, utilizing the tools that are at our disposal in creative and new ways is such a special um, gift, I think, that young people really have. Especially now, we have to be as creative as we can and really harness that to move forward. Okay, so getting back into the more specific, like nitty-gritty of like how to run a campaign. Um, in order to have a campaign be successful and effective, we need to make sure we already covered the goals and needing to know those beforehand. But when you're working on a team, especially for young people, this might be the first time that they're in this kind of space. Everybody's got different opinions on how they want to do things. And sometimes that can be a roadblock, and sometimes that can be a tool and a superpower. So, how can young people who are getting involved in campaigns take tangible steps towards ensuring that the goals of the campaign also align with the goals of everybody involved in the campaign? That's kind of a combination of both of these questions, but I feel like there's a lot to talk about that are kind of similar. So I'll just pose that here, and whoever wants to go for it can go ahead.
I can jump in quickly. I think one of the first things you should think about is, first of all, look at yourself and what you have in your tool bag. What are you good at? Perhaps it's making content, perhaps it's fundraising if you need for the campaign. But really, it's really knowing who are your supporters and your support system. Looking for a mentor is really important as well. I think it was mentioned earlier, like looking for people who've perhaps done similar things or can support your goal. Can go a long way. So I think that's really important to recognize. And I think the last bit being, don't forget to consult and talk to people, especially people who are most impacted with the goals that you're trying to achieve. It's really crucial just to even have a chat with people who are on the front lines, and perhaps even in the opposition, because it's really important to understand their perspectives as well and frame your campaign in a way that really touches and spreads the right message, especially when we're dealing with a lot of different perspectives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maria, anything to add?
Yeah, again, I'll reiterate that being very clear on what the goal of the campaign is or what the goal of the group is, can be the perfect way of dealing with this question because whenever you're working with people with different life experiences, disagreements are going to come up. That's just the nature of being human. But being very clear on what our overarching goal is, I think is step one. Because if you're not clear on your goal, then everyone's path to get to that goal, or to different goals, is just going to add a lot more chaos. So being very clear, where do we want to end? Like what is our end goal here can be good. And then you can have a very adult, mature, and respectful conversation about the ways that different people might approach how to reach that goal. Always being seeing the humanity in the other and always being respectful of the fact that just people might um, act or work in different ways has been very helpful for me. The power of perspective is incredibly helpful. You can choose to get angry at the fact that someone is not agreeing with you, or you can choose to see it as the fact that they're just not agreeing with you and it's not personal. They just want to work in a different way. Um, I think you just face each disagreement head on. I'll also say that it's for the second question, the personal motivations versus the shared goals, it's definitely a balancing act. Like Brigida was saying, it's incredibly important to look at what people have been doing already, trust expertise of people that have been doing this work for a very long time. I'll add a little tip is just reach out to anyone who is interesting to you on LinkedIn and just ask for 30 minutes of their time whenever they're available. So, and you just come with questions prepared to, be like, please, I would love to learn from you. Most people, 90% of people have always told me yes. So trust other people's expertise, try to learn as much as possible, but also ask them what has worked and what hasn't, and what haven't they tried that you can try. Learn from the wins and the mistakes of others is incredibly valuable as well, when you're trying to move towards collective action, for sure.
Totally. And to kind of draw a line between the responses that both of you gave, I think, Brigitte, to your point, talking to the opposition is like a criminally underrated aspect of campaign organizing. And I am a very opinionated person. I'm sure both of you are as well. I don't love having those kinds of tense, uncomfortable conversations, but it is a necessity. And Maria, to your point, when you have that kind of North Star goal, yes, the ins and outs of how you actually get to that point are important, but when you're talking to the opposition and you have that goal in mind, that makes that conversation way easier, and you're able to really communicate why you want to get to that point, whatever the issue is, it doesn't matter, and it just kind of helps your team settle and know that they can walk into those types of conversations confidently. And then I will also add, Maria, I love the idea of just reaching out to whoever on LinkedIn. I think that's great. I would add just a tool. I'm just going to throw this out here. Calendly is super helpful. I don't know if either of you guys use Calendly, but it really, really is helpful. And I can drop the link to that in the chat here in a second. Okay, so now getting into policy specifically. Sorry, I'm trying to get the Zoom window out of the way so I can actually read these questions. Okay, so starting off with smaller scale actions. We know we've all heard the phrase, think globally, act locally, but what does that actually mean in practice? How can young people connect their grassroots campaigns to broader policy and legislative efforts in order to create and scale up into that systemic change? I'll pass it over to whoever.
I can start us off, if that's all right.
Sure.
So yeah, I think just a baseline that I always remember is, everyone starts somewhere. It probably has to start small, especially for young leaders, but you shouldn't be discouraged with perhaps your small team that you start off with, because it can really go a long way if you have the right goals again and the right strategy. Um, for example, I when I started off the 30 by 30 Indonesia campaign, we started off as like a small group of high school students, which grew to about 400 supporters in a few weeks. But somewhere along the line, a few years later, we advocated and started a campaign advocating for the High Seas Treaty, also known as the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement, tying the alignment with protecting the global ocean in 30 by 30. And it has grown to over 16,000 signatures in a couple months. And leveraging that small community has really helped us multiply that impact. Taking the lessons learned from perhaps your first few campaigns and changing that, tweaking that, and taking back that feedback, working on any of the criticisms that you perhaps may face. It is really important. And I think grassroots campaigns have enough momentum to build towards a broader policy and legislative efforts.
Yes, absolutely. Maria, go ahead.
I mean, what Brigida said was, yeah, absolutely perfect. I will say my coalition is specific to law students. However, as law students who are trying to do environmental protective work, we can't exist in a vacuum. We need to be constantly speaking to scientists, but we need to be constantly speaking to the wider world of advocacy. So for us, it was very instrumental to be connected to Sustainable Ocean Alliance, which is just a global group of people, young people all over the world, that are doing ocean protective work. And speaking to them, being connected to them, really was able to shape and transform the way that we were showing up. They were connecting us to people who needed help, to lawyers who needed our help with legal research. And we were able just to find out what was missing that we could add. So being connected, try to find in whatever specific work that you're doing, try to find people who can connect you to others, people who can get you in conversations with not only just, at least in my case, lawyers, but with scientists, with people that have been working in policy, with artists, in order to build a really good campaign, you need so many different viewpoints, lived experiences, but also people who have different skills. And you can do that by finding who is a connective entity that I can reach out to who can help us get in these conversations. I think that is the best skill up you can do to create systemic change for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that leads really well into this next question, which is how can advocacy campaigns bridge the gap between simply raising awareness and pursuing legislative action, bridging that gap, and reaching out to those folks who have those insights. Maria, if you'd like to go first, you can go ahead.
So I think this is where pl like place-based advocacy is important. I can't speak to how the political situation of other countries other than the ones where I grew up in, which is Spain and the United States. However, I'll start off by saying that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Again, you can lean on and learn from what others are doing. We have done a lot of legislative work. We've spoken with congressional offices about deep sea mining. We have showed up at public hearings. We have lobbied very hard. And I can talk about what we've learned and what I would encourage other youth leaders to do if you are engaging directly through lobbying or other decision-making officials through lobbying. And the first one is you need to start planning in advance. I will say this is a tip that has helped. I like tips that you can very quickly implement coming from a law background, but it helps if you have something that shows that you are an organized group. And what this looks like is investing in a website, invest in creating a logo, invest in social media, even invest in just creating some sort of public profile. So if you are reaching out, if you're publishing something, if you're reaching out to elected officials, lawmakers, it looks like you're not just a random person from the street. You could be a group of high school students, you could be a group of law students, which is what we were. But the fact that we had a website, the fact that we could show, hey, some of the students in our coalition, we have been talking about this. We've been talking about this online. We have, articles online. It gave us a little bit of clout. We weren't just anyone. We knew that they knew that we had something to show for ourselves. Let's put it that way. Make sure that you've spoken or that you're learning from someone who has engaged decision makers or lawmakers before. Like I said, reach out to someone on LinkedIn. Make sure that you know what you're getting into, specifically in your own country. I could speak more about how to do it in the US, but I think it's very important to know what the political situation is or how to do that within each country. Then I would say part two is start with an email campaign. It can be a letter, a calling campaign. I started using an application that really helps us with this, where we can post an action, post what we would like the email to say, and then people can just use copy paste that email and send it to their elected representatives. This has helped us a lot. I will also say for in the country that I currently live in the United States, you need to ask about a month in advance if you want to meet with elected officials. Elected officials technically work for you. You're the one, your taxpayer money is the ones that are paying them. So you do have the right to meet with them, at least where I live. So it helps if it's in an ocean. We have Capitol Hill Ocean Week here in June, which is when we go to Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and we talk to our elected officials. But you can look if is there like an environmental day in your country? Is there an ocean day in your country? And reach out months in advance and you can ask them. The most powerful thing is to meet with them face to face, but a phone call or an email also works. Stalk their secretaries, find their emails online, be persistent. A lot of the time, it took some time, but they did eventually meet with us. When you show up with a plan of what you're going to do and how you're going to talk about it. Come with a folder, I find, if you are meeting in person, with proof to back up what you're talking about. Come with proof that you've mobilized X amount of people with a campaign. Come with a clear ask of what you want your lawmakers to do. So just very much come with a plan in advance. Go in a group, I think that helps. And just come with who's going to talk about what, and how are we going to manage this meeting. And then afterwards, always thank them publicly for their time. This can do a lot. You can say, I met with X politician or X lawmaker. I met with their team, and we were very happy with this conversation. This means, one, they love being thanked, right? You want to give them something to make them happy. So they're more likely to want to work with you also in the future. But then two, it shows that, hey, we are what we're talking about in our meeting isn't just going to stay in our meeting. The rest of the coalitions that we're here to represent, are paying attention to what is going on in these meetings. And I can find that these are things that can be very, very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a very, very helpful list, Maria. I think um most places, it again, very much to your point, does depend on, how the political system works. But in theory, under democracy, we should be able to let our representatives know how we feel about certain things, and then they will respond accordingly. And we are finding very quickly we have to be creative in that even. But yes, thank you, Maria, for all of that. I will pass it to Brigitte if you would like to add your insights to this.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what Maria said. You touched on a lot of the points that are really, really important. I think um, place-based advocacy is really important to recognize because I think the system's a little different where I am in Indonesia, and it might be or it might feel for us it's harder to reach these policymakers and decision-making officials. It's not as common, I think. But recognizing that, it's also still valuable to try and send them cold emails or tag them on social media, putting public pressure or just even mentioning what you're hoping to get out of them. And if you do have the chance to meet them in person, you do have to have that ask. Know who you're talking to and know what you can ask of them. Either it's a direct action plan or someone who can lead you to the right person. I think that's really important. And I think one other tip that I would say is that if you have the opportunity to attend a conference as a youth delegate and you know that there might be high-level officials there, I think it's really important to try and go. Seek opportunities for you to get a pass or a youth pass, delegate pass into that conference because a lot of these conferences allow you direct interactions with these leaders. And if you're putting them on the spot, usually there's no way that they can not talk to you. Even if it's just a small conversation, it's really important that you actually voice what you're doing and what your concerns are. But also remembering that you've got to also respect that they might not have the answer right away, but they can answer you perhaps through a follow-up, etc. And yeah, navigating those like little moments would be really important in that case.
Yeah, and I would absolutely emphasize the importance of being physically present in those types of spaces like conferences and stuff. Maria mentioned Capitol Hill Ocean Week. I have personally been to 7 of the last 11 Capitol Hill Ocean Weeks in Washington, D.C. And it is not only like do you feel like you're in community and from just like a mental health perspective, it makes you just feel really good to like be in community with people who care a lot about the same things that you do, but it is also like sometimes life changing to be in those rooms and be a part of those conversations, especially as a young person. So, really, like if Sustainable Ocean Alliance is one of them. They've been really great about getting young people into those rooms. There's a lot of other wonderful organizations who are also really on that journey and getting young people at the table in those really high level conversations. And if you ever have the opportunity to um, participate in that, or I mean, even just do anything to move in that direction, I could not like encourage that enough because I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't, taken those steps to be in those spaces. So definitely agree on all of those points. Okay, so now getting back to like the tangible results of your campaign. We've talked a lot about like big picture, about like how the ins and outs of legislation and organizing there. But when it comes to like the technical aspect of things, how can you tell if your campaign is doing well? So I will pose this first question, pretty basic, but kind of also kind of overarching and large scale. What defines a successful campaign? What does that look like to you? I'll pass it over to whoever wants to go first.
I can start. I was actually struggling with this question. I was thinking about it quite a lot when we were in the planning process for this. And I realized that at the end of the day, you define what success looks like. Success is not going to look like the same for any one campaign. It is important, though, to define what you think success looks like in accordance to what you're doing. But I don't think I can come here and tell you without knowing what most of you are working on, what success should look like for you. I will say, depending on the campaign, for us, success looks like people finding out more about this issue. That's how we can define success. It can look like if there is a public comment period where the public should be commenting on what they think a law is going to do, having 100 more people comment on it that wouldn't have commented without it because of a campaign we did, because of a social media campaign, or because of an info session that we did. That to us looks like success. Um, I will say, overarching, I do feel like our campaign is working because, as I said, when I started this work, people would tell me that this was a done deal. But within the last month, deep sea mining, which is the project that I most work on, a lot of mining companies that want to mine the deep sea. Mining the deep sea is incredibly expensive, and so they constantly have to look for investment, and they're having a really hard time looking for investment. They actually had a huge meeting, and a Greenpeace advocate snuck in, and then he wrote to us about what was going on. And he was saying that a lot of these investors are worried, not only because of the environmental impacts. Actually, they weren't that worried about that because they didn't really care that much about the environment, but they did care a lot about environmentalists, and they did care a lot about bad press. And what we were doing was making a lot of bad press around this industry, which was one of our goals. So that to us was incredible success. Behind closed doors, investors are worried to invest in something because of the bad press that we've put out there. That to us is incredible success. But that's been after a couple years of hard work. Throughout the time, what success has looked like is getting more people to care about what our message is, getting more people to be a part of this process. I love human psychology, and once you get someone to comment on something that you've done, once you get someone to engage in something that you've done, they're more likely to keep doing it because now they have a personal relationship with it. You've helped them create a memory. So getting more people to engage with us, getting more people to learn about what's happening in the deep ocean, getting more people to even learn about the incredible biodiversity of the deep ocean, to us, that means success. Definitely very important for you to sit down when you're starting your campaign and think, what do we want success to be like? How how flimsy or um how much can that goalpost change as we're working? But definitely I think it's something that you and your team need to decide for yourselves, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Brigitte, how about you? How do you define a successful campaign?
Yeah, I think I agree with Maria's point to the fact that, success can look different for everyone. I think, for example, when we started off that campaign for the High Seas Treaty, we were trying to get Indonesia to ratify the BBNJ agreement. And these are areas beyond national jurisdiction. To leading up to that, we actually ended up defining that success looks like having Indonesia ratify. And although it sounded pretty hard to get, especially because we weren't sure um, whether, where the national policy frameworks have aligned, and what, like, how much change needs to happen within the legislation. But we did get in touch with a group of lawyers, and we wrote a petition that pretty much sums up why we need this BBNJ agreement to take force. Um, but I think defining what what it looks like for us really helped us in developing what we needed out of the people we were gonna ask to, advocate for these. Um, we we also thought that, when we are looking at these metrics, it's important to recognize that there's metrics on people engaged versus people reached. One thing that I would note as well is that, engaged and reached can mean two different things. Engaged being some sort of action taken by the people of interest. And reach sometimes can just mean like a social media um, um, reach, as in how many people have gone across or looked or have been exposed to your awareness raising. Um, and I think one other indicator that can be useful, depending on what campaigns you're doing, is also some sort of survey. It can be pre and post if it's possible, but of course, a post event survey is always useful and probably more doable than a pre and post survey. But I think these metrics do help, especially just not just for measuring against your goals, but also looking back at what you did right or what you could improve on in the future.
Yeah, totally. And I think that leads really well into our next question, but I also have to emphasize the importance of pre and post surveys. I am such a huge survey girly. I love looking at that kind of data. We will talk about a little bit of a meta moment here, the post survey for this program, and incentivizing people to take it so that we can look at that data, look at how to improve our program, and then the incentive is you get a certificate of participation for this program when you fill out the post-program survey. So definitely appreciate you bringing that point up, Brigitte. And to kind of flow into this next question, how do you measure that impact? You were talking about reach and engagement. What are the actual tools that are the most helpful for you to use to look at that data?
I think quickly adding on, I think the most important thing beyond, the normal Google Forms or whatever tool you use to take that survey or measure that reach number, is having a contact list. I think it's not really a tool, but really more so having something that like puts a name down and some sort of contact address for you to then reach out again at some point, like mentioning perhaps how thankful you are for them participating in whatever campaign you organized, or just having them support whatever action outcome that you have after a certain event. And of course, this is mostly digital nowadays. So I think a simple spreadsheet or Google form would do on my end. Yeah, feel free to add on.
Yeah, I think that you said it wasn't exactly a tool. I would actually disagree with that because having a network is a tool and communications is a tool. So it is yeah, those pre and post surveys wherever you can be collecting people's contact information for continued engagement and outreach is like top tier. Very, very, very important to remember. Maria, do you have anything to add to this?
Yes, and I actually love the second part of this question. What tools can young people use to determine this? To what I was talking about before, the use of social media. And I want to say a specific example of a campaign we did. There was going to be a change to a law that was going to make mining the deep sea practically easier. That's a very condensed idea of what was happening. But basically, there was an open comment period in the United States. The general public gets a chance to talk on this, and the federal agency that is allowing this to happen is required to look at this. So our goal for this campaign was to get as many people, one, to educate as many people as possible on what was happening, why this was important, and try to convince as many people as we could to submit a public comment. So we were thinking, how can we have as much of an impact on this? And I can't emphasize enough the importance of having people to have a personal relationship to the issue that's happening. This can be life-changing. So me and my social media team decided that what we were going to do is anyone who submits a public comment gets a personal reading from us, and we're going to tell you what your specific deep sea spirit animal is. And so we were like, anyone who shows us like a screenshot of the fact that they took this action, we are going to stalk your profile. We're going to ask you about yourself, and then we're going to tell you about all the incredible biodiversity that's in the deep sea and which one specifically lines up with you and your energy and your lived experience. And it sounds a little simple and maybe a little stupid, but it worked incredibly well. We had over 100 people submit public comments that wouldn't have otherwise. That to us was an incredibly impactful event. For us, like I said before, for us, the most important thing is to get as many people as possible to care about this, as many people as possible to speak to their elected representatives, to actually be submitting public comments. That to us is impact, because that to us turns into investors not wanting to invest into their elected representatives, seeing, oh, okay, my constituents actually care about this. So that's how we measure impact. And I would always just recommend anyone listening, try to figure out how you can get people to feel a personal connection to the issue that you're trying to advocate for.
Yeah, definitely. Those types of incentives are always so fun to come up with, whether it's like in this instance for our program, a certificate of completion for the program, or a personalized reading. I think that's like so fun and creative and like, yeah, kind of a silly thing, but it's still something that like incentivizes people to want to engage. And I think that's kind of the purpose here. It's awesome. Let me just double check where we are on time. Okay, so this is our last question slide, and then we'll move right into the Q&A. I know we've already got some in the Q&A here, and I saw Maria, you were typing answers. Appreciate that. But to wrap up the discussion, we've talked about a lot of different things today, but the most important thing I think we've both of you have already mentioned is community and the importance of leaning on the community around you, tapping into the experts who are already doing the work, who have been doing the work. And so this first question I think is very, very important in that regard. And it is, how can campaign leaders ensure their campaign goals genuinely reflect and support the needs of the community they aim to serve? Let's start there. I'll pass it over to whoever wants to go first.
I think to my point earlier as well, and some points mentioned, it is really crucial to set up a time or even just an informal discussion with as many people as you can, from all the different perspectives that you can get, and see whether, what they think about the campaign, how it can be improved, and also leveraging talking points, to perhaps address a certain concern that aligns or that directly comes out of your campaign. Because as much as you can, getting those conversations really gives you that genuine feel of that human aspect of who these people are, who would be either impacted by the campaign or be part of the people pushing for that campaign. So I think sending those cold emails, sending those LinkedIn connections are really important. Setting up a time on Calendly is also really cool. But also, I think there was a similar question in the chat earlier. But um, even if you don't get a response, it's really still important for you to take that first step of, asking them that question. It is worth trying because you may never know when they're available to chat. But if you don't get a response, don't get discouraged because sometimes it's not anything against you. It's more so perhaps it goes into spam or perhaps it just gets filtered through their messages. So don't take that against yourself, but really just keep going. Find more people. I'm sure that some people are eager to talk to you and even collaborate. And I think finding the right mentors from the get-go is really important because those mentors can perhaps direct you to the right people and introduce you to NGOs, community groups that can support your campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. Maria, anything to add?
Yes, absolutely on the mentors. Can't say how important they are. Incredible point. I would also say, again, this goes to the importance of defining what the culture is. You can do that by defining your goal, as we talked about before, but sort of defining the culture and sort of thinking who actually is our community. Because for us, deep sea mining is not allowed in our current coast, but the deep sea mining that we are fighting is in international waters. It's happening in American Samoa, it's happening in Guam, it's happening in the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. These are islands that are very far away from us. It's also happening now, or going to happen, or the federal government wants it to happen in Alaska. These are communities that aren't my own. They're not communities that I currently live in. I believe that the ocean is, it's something that affects all of us. So we all have a right to care about it, and we all have a right to work to protect it. But the communities that are on the front line of this issue aren't my communities. So it's very important that in the work that we're doing, we're in constant conversation with the communities that are in the front line. A lot of them are indigenous to these places, so they have very strong cultural ties to the areas that are actually going to get mined. It's incredibly important that as part of our advocacy, we are also talking to lawmakers or whoever it is and just reiterating the importance of that they should also be in the conversation if they aren't already. And their cultural connection to the place that we are trying to protect needs to be a part of the conversation as well. So it looks like one, always reaching out to them first, listening to them, listening to the needs of their community as a frontline community, and making sure that that's something that we're thinking about as we do our advocacy, and making sure that we're being respectful and that um, we also think about in our work, not everyone, like I said, not everyone, not every group is a monolith. So making sure that we're respectful that there might be different opinions within these groups that we're working as we do our advocacy. But yeah, incredibly important that you are in whatever group, in whatever work or project that you're doing, that you do think about what communities might be frontline communities, what community are we serving? If it's your community, great. It's way easier to make connections or get in conversation when it's already within your own community. I mean, and if it's not necessarily a community that you're immediately a part of, doing those LinkedIn reach outs, nonprofits as well. It's good to like find other nonprofits that might have already worked with this community, trying to reach out to them specifically. And like I said about before, in the term of cold reaching out, posing your group as someone who is professional and has a professional profile to show for it can be super helpful as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that both of you kind of touched on identifying and engaging with potential allies, collaborators such as schools, NGOs, community groups. You both touched on that within both of your responses. I think that a lot of what you also said also touches on the second question, but I want to focus in on this intergenerational aspect here because we are young people. We have young people participating in this program and watching us right now. And it feels very fragmented a lot of the time when we're dealing with lawmakers and high level decision makers, regardless of the community. Most of the time, they are older than us. And there's a lot of kind of awkwardness and sometimes disdain, even between younger and older communities when it comes to community advocacy, no matter what the issue is. So, to wrap up here, and then we got some really great questions in the Q&A. Last question, how can intergenerational collaboration strengthen youth-led campaign efforts, and what are some ways to bridge generational gaps in organizing? I'll pass it over to whoever wants to go first.
I mean, I can go. I'll say that what Brigida said, the idea of mentorship is incredibly important, at least for us, since we are a coalition of law students, reaching out to older lawyers who have had very interesting litigation wins, who we know that they align with the values that our coalition has, is incredibly important. Lawyers love to talk specifically about themselves, so it's great to always buy them a coffee, sit them down, go with questions, asking them, would you be willing to be a mentor for us in this specific campaign that we're doing right now? Would you be willing to help us? I think that can be really a great way of bridging those generational gaps. Yeah.
I think just to add on from Maria's point, a lot of the work that we do in both 30 by 30 Indonesia and Diversities is intergenerational. And what we've realized is when you come in and try to introduce yourself as someone who's willing to learn and respect them for who they are, especially if you're talking to older generations, it really puts you in a position where they are more willing to open their arms up and mentor you instead of coming in and actually trying to make them do something. It's more important to stay open and, respectful because I think culture based, it's also a little different in different parts of the world, but generally keeping that understanding that, some people do want a little more respect sometimes. But yeah, I think that's really important to bridge that gap and really recognizing that they perhaps have different opinions because of the generation that they grew up in and the state of the world when they grew up. But yeah, recognizing that, pointing that out, and just remaining respectful every time is really important.
I
Yeah.
will say, sorry, I was just thinking as Brigida was talking that a lot of the time is maybe younger generations, we feel that older generations don't understand us. And maybe this is just like a view we have of the general view that we have of this whole generation ahead of us, but maybe the older generation feels the same way about us. So it can be really helpful if you're going to go talk to a lawmaker or you're going into a networking event, to ask maybe someone who's older to introduce you to someone or someone who's older to come into the room with you. So if you're speaking with a lawmaker who's way older than everyone in your group, which has happened to us, having someone older come in with us can really help show us that, hey, there's someone for them to also connect with, right? It's easier for us to connect with someone that looks like us, is from the same generation as us. So there is definitely a way to operationalize that as well. Asking for help of bridging. If you have to talk to a generation that's older because they're the ones that have the power right now, they're the ones that can make something to change, then having those people on our team can help us as well.
Yeah, and staying curious, just asking those questions is a huge component of that as well. Okay, so getting into Q&A, we've got a couple of minutes here. Somebody asked from the Brookfield Zoo as a conservation science scholar a couple of different questions that I think are really interesting here, but I'm going to kind of touch on all of them at once if I can, because we also have some other great questions. So the third question that they presented is how do I share my ideas efficiently and effectively so that people listen as I'm not doing this as a group? Um, Coming from a young person, I will just answer that outright. The fact that you are a young person talking about these issues, they are going to pay attention to that alone. They absolutely, anybody in the conservation space understands that young people really are at the front of this, or at least for the most part they do. That's a blanket statement that take that with a grain of salt, but for the most part people in leadership positions within the field of conservation do very much take seriously the concerns of young people. But for Brigitte and Maria, I wanted to specifically ask one of these questions to you guys, which is, what are some ways that zoos and aquariums can spread more awareness to the public about climate issues? Because we've talked a lot about different community groups, but how can those sort of informal education institutions um, kind of lend their efforts to organizing efforts? Does that make sense? I'll pass it over to whoever wants to go first.
I mean, I can start. I will say I love this question because I love aquariums specifically. I think they are incredibly important. I was just recently having a conversation with someone that was telling me that a lot of these species that are going extinct in the wild are being, kept alive. These species still exist in our world because aquariums are really putting in the effort of making sure that they're breeding them ethically, et cetera, et cetera. I think you have a very unique as an aquarium. Aquariums are beautiful, very peaceful spaces. Children love them, but also they're incredible places to create events. So any sort of event, you can do a talk, you can do like a lecture series, you can bring in to the space. The fact that you have access to this space, you can bring in people that are maybe specific fish scientists for specific fish that your aquarium has, so they can speak to them. I think that could be an incredible idea. I also just think if you're doing a tour or you're talking about this with the younger generation, being very clear that these species are facing threats in the wild. And I always love ending whatever advocacy I'm doing with a call to action, specifically saying, we're talking about things that are hard, but this is what you specifically can do to do something better. Like you can call your representative, you can send this email. Having something that's very short and sweet at the end, it always helps a lot.
Totally. Brigitte, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that's really, really useful tips, and I completely agree with that. But I think one other thing that I would add on to take into account, depending on the zoos, unfortunately, not all zoos do conservation work. So if you are trying to engage with them to do campaign efforts for conservation, you probably need to do a little more advocating for these issues than you would think. So be careful with the wording that you use and what you're trying to implement. But yeah, th that's just a little heads up.
Definitely. In the United States, we have the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, which holds these types of institutions to a higher legal standard. And there is also an international version of that as well. I believe the acronym is WAZA, but I don't remember what that acronym actually stands for. But just making sure that any of the institutions that you are working with are accredited is a really important point, Brigitte. And then they're also just like a trusted community network resource, and like people who visit are people who you can engage with for these types of campaigns, to both of your points. Um, Now we have like 1 minute left, and I do have some announcements, but I'm gonna have this be our last Q&A question. How do I start a network in university as an upcoming first year student, especially with professors and programs? And I think one of the ways that we can kind of approach this question is how do you engage with the student body, but also with the administration? And I think, you said as a up and coming first year student, there's a lot of ways to do that. You have plenty of time, but I don't necessarily think that you being a first year student is a factor in that. Like you can do that at any point in college, and the fact that you want to do that early is great. But yeah, I'll pass that question off to both of you.
I think just to start off, it's the same sort of tip, like reach out to the professors or the lecturers that you think are open. And usually those are the people who are active on LinkedIn, for example, might be more likely to respond to you. But also, by any means, approach them in person if there's an event, or if you know that there's a lecture that they're doing, come to them after class. And I think another point is that, you will probably find other people, other students who have similar interests with you. So it can be a point to connect with them. If there's no like club or society that already is already doing that, you can try to start one of your own. Yeah, those are just some things that came up.
Definitely.
Agree with that. I'll also say my first year of college, I there was a career fair day and I just signed up to all of them. Not because I necessarily wanted to be a part of all of them, but because I would get their emails and I would see what events they were doing. I think that's a great way to start and just really getting connected to the student body, specifically with professors. Email them or just look at a lot of them have pages online. Look at their websites, see if there's anyone that you align with or their work aligns with you. And you can always just ask them to meet for 30 minutes, grab a coffee, explain what your goals are and see if they can help you. Most of them, they're literally paid to help you, at least within the university. And being a university student is such a incredible time in your life because you are in this environment where you are supposed to find out what you love and what you want to do. And professors can definitely help you. And I will say, definitely, like Regina was saying, for me, my first year of law school is when I started this coalition, because although I go to a law school that cares a lot about environmental law, no one was doing anything specifically that was very much ocean work, and more specifically deep ocean work. So I saw this gap and I decided to just go ahead and do it, and start this coalition. So if you see a gap and it's something that you care about, again, reach out, find out how other people have started clubs, like we talked about, do all the steps we talked about, but then just do it. Don't think too much about it. You'll be surprised at how much work and how much incredible work you can get done in this world, when you're surrounded by people who support you and you have a very clear plan of what you want to do.
And I think I have one last point to add on. I think on the point of reaching out to professors, it's also probably a good idea if you want to reach out to their students, more specifically if they have PhD students in their lab or anyone they're directly working with who knows the professor or the lecturer well, they're more likely to respond as well because they perhaps have more time and they probably have similar interests with you or are students themselves who knows how to approach these issues. So that's a good tip for you guys.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys both so much. Okay, really quickly, I know we're over time here, so I'm going to try to get through these as quick as possible. Session four, that is our fourth and final session for this cycle of advocacy training. That is next Saturday at 6 to 7 Eastern or UTC -4. That is event planning and fundraising. I will not be there. We have World Ocean Day intern and Youth Advisory Council alumni, Paulina, who is going going to be hosting that fourth session. So she's going to do a great job. I'm really excited for you guys to engage with her. And hopefully you join us for that fourth session. Now, I know a couple of you have asked about showing up late or missing a session. Like I said at the beginning, that is totally okay. All of these sessions are recorded and will be uploaded to the World Ocean Day YouTube. Sessions 1 and 2 are already on YouTube. This one will be uploaded maybe Monday or Tuesday. And then I also know that we've gotten a lot of questions about certificates of completion. I already mentioned this during this session. We are doing a feedback survey. So after session 4, which is next Saturday, like I said, we will be sending out the feedback survey. And if you can submit a completed feedback survey before the given deadline, you will earn a certificate of completion. We usually give you guys about 2 weeks to fill out the survey, and then we'll close it. And if you don't fill it out within that time, you will not receive the certificate. So please be sure to check your email. Like I said, that will go out after session 4. So not this week, but next week. Or sorry, I guess the week after next. And then last but not least, if you do have any questions, please feel free to email Ji Hyun. She is my former colleague at the Ocean Project. She's doing a wonderful job managing all of the youth programming over at World Ocean Day. And she'll be able to answer any questions that you have about youth leadership training. And that is it for today. Maria, Brigitte, thank you both so much for your insights. You're both so knowledgeable in your areas of expertise, and it's so inspiring to talk to both of you. Thank you so much for the work that you do and for joining us in your spare time on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning. And we just really appreciate you being with us today. And then to everybody else watching, thank you guys as well. It's always lovely to have so many folks joining us from all around the world on these calls. And I hope you learned something and see you next week as well. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Brigitte.
Thank you for having me. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.